train, whose history dates back to Queen Victoria, because it costs too much to operate and would have needed a significant upgrade for more advanced rail systems. The train, actually a suite of 9 rail cars that can be hitched to commercial locomotives, will be decommissioned sometime before the current maintenance contract expires in 2027. That will bring to an end a tradition that dates back to 1869, when Queen Victoria commissioned a pair of special coaches to accommodate her travels around the country. Charles de Ledesma, London.
Spanish authorities say 2 people have died in northeastern Spain. It happened in a wildfire that spread quickly before firefighters brought it under control. That fire came amid a European heat wave that's sending thermometers soaring. Breaking news at townhall.com. Operation Road Test uncovers driver's license fraud.
Staten Island prosecutors say a New York City driving school paid off DMV examiners to fraudulently fast-track driver's licenses for illegal immigrants, regardless of whether they knew how to drive. Officials say T&E Driving School in Queens took cash from non-English-speaking Chinese immigrants and paid off a crew of Department of Motor Vehicles employees on Staten Island to illegally obtain driver's licenses. The crackdown was a joint investigation with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Tasha Stevens reporting.
Myrtle Beach, South Carolina has become the fastest growing U.S. metro for seniors. U.S. Census Bureau data shows its population age 65 and older grew by 6.3% last year, the highest rate nationwide. In the 2020s, the senior population there increased by more than 22%. More on these stories at townhall.com.
The following is an America Matters media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of America Matters Media.
Hello, everybody. This is Brady, also known in some odd corners of the internet as Warhamster, co-hosting the debut episode of a new program that we're calling the Re-Federalist Radio. Co-hosting with me is my good friend, constitutional mentor, Mr. Constitution himself, Douglas V. Gibbs. Doug, thanks for joining. How you doing?
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Doug's a veteran of radio, and so he's going to have a lot to say. But I'll have him tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But first, I'd like to thank all those listening on 93.7 KPGF and AM 11060, and all of you listening on the affiliate networks and stations, especially ZackyRadio.com. If you want to catch the video replay of today's show and future shows, just go to Rumble and type in War Space Hamster, and you'll see all my videos, many of which also feature Mr. Gibbs. So real quick, Doug, just give a quick introduction of yourself. What have you been doing the last couple of decades? And you can give a quick shout out to where new listeners can find your material.
All right, Douglas V. Gibbs. I'm known on the online as Mr. Constitution, douglasvgibbs.com. I began teaching Constitution classes as far back as 2008. Began my radio career August 6th, 2011. So I've been on AM radio for quite a while. And I'm also a public speaker and an author. I've got 13 books out there and podcaster. And just recently, Mr. Constitution Hour was ranked number 9 for constitutional podcasts on the air. And I got a kick out of the fact that it's 4 higher than John Birch Society, who I respect, but I'm 4 notches higher than them. So I put a smile on my face. So once again, if you want to find me, douglasvgibbs.com.
Very good. Doug and I have been working together now for about 4 or 5 years in various enterprises. Whether me kind of taking over for him when he was out of town teaching his Constitution class, or we started doing shows about 2-3 years ago. We're calling this show Re-Federalist Radio, and it's an offshoot of our video series called the Re-Federalist Report that you can find on my Rumble channel. In the Re-Federalist Report, we try to explain the original intent of the Constitution by going through the source documents in the hopes that we can get this nation back on track to the system of federalism and states' rights that the founders prescribed originally. In the Re-Federalist Radio, this new program, we're going to look at current political events and try to analyze them, looking through that same original intent lens. So, Doug, real quick, why does original intent matter so much?
Well, it's funny because Let me answer that question in the beginning with a problem, which is called interpretation. We have a judicial and political interpretation of the Constitution that pushes it in a direction that was never intended to go. So that's why originalism is so important. The Founding Fathers knew what they were doing, and the Constitution is a contract. It's a social contract, and just like any contract, the original intent, the agreement, is what needs to be followed. If there needs to be changes, then there must be an amendment process followed. What we have is interpretation in which we live under a totally different constitution. That's basically an annotated version, thanks to the courts and the political establishment. And what it has done is has moved us away from the original system that has provided liberty and prosperity for this country over 250 years.
Yeah, and it's eroded incrementally over the last 2+ centuries as each successive court builds on the case law of the previous one and continues to get away from the original intent.
And that's how English common law was working. English common law was not written, and it changed based on the whims of society and the rulings by judges. It was living and breathing. Our Constitution was not designed to be a living and breathing document. It's a contract, supposed to be followed. If there needs to be changes, not through the courts, not through the whims of society. There is a process.
Yeah, it's called the amendment process, and we'll talk about that a bit, because one of the very first encroachments on where the judiciary branch got out of its lane was the Judiciary Act of 1789, which actually changed what the jurisdiction of these new federal courts would have. Now, that's fine. You can make the argument for things like judicial review and having jurisdiction over state issues, but you've got to go through the process, and that should have been the amendment process ratified by the states, not the third bill ever passed by the first Congress.
And we got to remember that the states, they're the ones that sent their delegates to this Constitutional Convention in 1787. They're the ones creating the federal government, and they established checks and balances that also included oversight by the states. And so what we've seen over the last 200 years is this system eroded, the voice of the states being removed. And so what happens is now you've got a centralized system running away with power.
Very good. Today's topic, we are going to do our second annual, what we call SCOTUS scorecard, where we grade the recent Supreme Court decisions on a letter grade, A through F, or sometimes incomplete. And we did that last year.
Can we throw one satisfactory in there?
That would be an F. And we got a couple of those. And let me just show I'll show the scorecard when we get back from break. What we do is we look at recent Supreme Court decisions, not from a legal viewpoint, which you can get on any Legal Eagles YouTube channel, but this is from a constitutional original intent view. And like I said, if you want to go back and see last year's SCOTUS scorecard, go to my Rumble channel, which is War Space Hamster, scroll back exactly a year and look for episodes 6 through 8 of the Re-Federalist. I'm a bit harder to find on YouTube, but most of my and our content is there on my channel, which is at Warhamster2560, random numbers they assigned me. And that's what we're going to be doing today is we're going to go through some recent cases. It'll probably take us 2 to 3 weeks on this show to get through them all, but sit back, buckle up. I think you'll enjoy the ride.
Yeah, I think you'll get a little constitutional history wower at it, because that's an important part of what we're going through.
Yeah, and we're going to take our time case by case, because there's a lot of issues that we'll look into. What were the founders thinking when this applied in the first place, and why the Supreme Court justices are applying it this way today. And it fits into today's political world very well. And these are important questions. And go ahead.
I'm just going to say also, as we approach break, stay tuned, stay buckled in. It's going to get interesting.
At A Proper Fit Footwear in the Reno Town Mall, we've been accomplishing happy feet for over 30 years.
We offer a various range of shoe styles and sizes for both men and women. From all-season shoes and orthotics to work boots and safety shoes, our professional and reliable staff possesses the knowledge to help you find the proper shoes to fit your needs. Hard to fit? Hard to find?
A Proper Fit Footwear is here to give our customers happy feet. We make people aware of potential foot problems as we're sizing their feet, suggesting the right arch support, and guiding them to the proper shoes for their needs.
Stop by A Proper Fit Footwear at 4001 South Virginia Street in the Reno Town Mall today, and allow the owner Mike Jones and our fabulous staff to find the perfect pair of shoes tailored to your specific needs.
a proper fit footwear in the Reno Town Mall, the home of Happy Feet, where comfort and your feet meet.
Can you define the 4 different parts of Medicare? Do you have Medicare prescription drug gap coverage? At Nevada Senior Advisors, we will walk through the different parts of Medicare, including Medicare Advantage, Medicare Supplement, Part D prescription drug plans, to help you determine which option is right for you. Visit nvsenioradvisors.com, call 775-674-2223 to set up an appointment. Nevada Senior Advisors is not affiliated with or endorsed by the federal Medicare program or any other government agency. Calling this number will direct you to a licensed sales agent.
Have you been injured in an accident? Trust Adriana Guzman-Freilich at AGF Law, your local personal injury law firm in Reno. At AGF Law, we pride ourselves on being honest, hardworking, and ethical. Let's meet in person to understand your case and fight for your rights. Located near South Virginia and Plum, we're always ready to help. Don't navigate the aftermath of an accident alone. Call Adriana at 775-453-9595 or visit adrianalegal.com. Your recovery is our priority, and we're committed to getting you the justice you deserve.
Want to expand your advertising dollar? Sponsor this or any America Matters program by calling 775-827-8900, extension 2. Now back to
And we are back from our break. Let's jump into it, Doug. First thing I'd like to do is let's talk about the SCOTUS scorecard. For those of you who don't have you're listening on the radio and can't see it, what we're looking at here is an Excel spreadsheet. Very simply, we just lay out each of the major cases that Supreme Court decided last year. And on the right-hand side, we each give them a letter grade. You can see we gave them some A's and some B pluses early on. And there's a big fat red F score we both gave them. That's all usually going to be the case when the Supreme Court rules on gun laws. That's a trend we'll see quite a bit. But we're going to flip over to 2025 Supreme Court cases.
You'll notice the grades between Warhamster and I are similar and close, but not exactly the same typically. So, and we do differentiate a little bit when it comes to certain parts of what we're looking at. But and for those of you who are new to this, SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States. That's what SCOTUS stands for. So if you hear us say that, that's what that is.
Yeah. And we'll be filling out this SCOTUS scorecard for 25 as we go. We have not rehearsed this. We both read the cases, but we're going to talk it out and give this our grades live on air. Mm-hmm. So with no further ado, let's jump into the big one. This is Trump versus CASA, Trump versus CASA, which we previewed back in January because we knew this was going to be a big deal. That was episode 32 of the Re-Federalist Report on my Rumble channel. This is the case that originally started when Trump gave an executive order on birthright citizenship. And his executive order wanted to end that practice. We're not going to get too deep into birthright citizenship today because that's going to be on the docket that'll be decided this fall. And we're going to break it down quite a bit. But Doug and I have talked about birthright citizenship. It's also on my channel. We've gone into a lot of detail on that. The big case, as it was argued on the emergency docket by Trump's Solicitor General, was not on the merits. This went onto the docket as an emergency docket. So the Supreme Court did not make this one wind its way through the federal judiciary system as they normally do. This was an emergency that had to be addressed sooner or later. And the issue was we had judges all over the country, and just district judges, issuing national injunctions, basically saying, well, we think, we basically are going to tell everyone in the entire country that's affected by this, that this order is not in effect until it gets adjudicated. And basically the U.S. Solicitor General argues that, no, that's overstepping your bounds.
It's funny because, and I'm listening to this and I'm kind of grinning because, it's funny how we look at things. Once again, it goes back to interpretation. We have to understand the three branches. The executive branch, the job is of the executive branch of the president is to execute law. So the first question has to be, is it law? Is there a law behind it? And I'll give you birthright citizenship, for example. And if you look up law that says if you're born on America's soil and you're guaranteed citizenship as a result, there is 0 laws that say that, not one. But there is a law that says if you're born on America's soil and your parents are subject to a foreign power, you're not a citizen. That's the Civil Rights Act of 1866. So the president is actually executing law that is in place. And the job of the justices are to say, if that's the case, okay, he is or he is not executing a law that exists. And then they can give their opinion. Opinion is not legally binding. It is a judicial opinion. In the end, it's still up to the executive or the legislature, depending on what the ruling is about or the opinion is about, to make those adjustments. And that's where we're running into problems. So when we go through these, just keep that in mind about about what it is that these branches are supposed to be doing.
Yeah, very much so. In this particular case, is really about jurisdiction. Does a federal district court have jurisdiction over the rest of the country? And quite clearly, our answer is going to be no. We'll get into it a little bit more.
And do they have the authority to tell the president of the United States, regardless of what level they are as a judge? You can't do that. You micromanage another branch.
And that's where a lot of the arguments came down around that exact issue.
Separation of powers.
Very much so. So basically, Trump's Solicitor General argues that no, they've overstepped their bounds. The opposition, which would have been these 3 states that were trying to file injunctions, that's what CASA stands for.
And I wrote an article about that, the death of universal injunction. So if you guys want to look it up, get some detail, check it out.
Yep, and we actually, and again, we did that video about universal injunctions before this, right the day before this was even heard. And I think we did a pretty good job and actually predicted the outcome pretty well.
Yeah,
as we pat ourselves on the back.
Don't hurt your shoulder there, all right?
Well, the original opinion, they came to it was a 6-3 decision in favor of ending these.
Wait, and let me say this real quick: 6-3. That's huge. Not 5-4, 6-3. We know 3 particular justices are always going to rule against our president. Then there's a couple in there that waver. And so the 6-3 is actually very huge.
Indeed. And that's why it's so surprising that this opinion, and this is one of the most important opinions they'll give all year, in fact, maybe the next few years, was actually written by Amy Coney Barrett. And she's been one of those in the middle that's gone the wrong direction on some things if you're a conservative. But the fact that her and John Roberts, the other, shall we say, swing vote, were both behind this, it's surprising that ACB, Amy Coney Barrett, gave that decision. When she announced it, she went on for about 10 minutes about flexible but not freewheeling, called equitable authority of the courts. How do the courts exercise their equitable authority without overstepping the executive branch's authority? She held that the universal injunctions likely exceed the equitable authority that Congress has given to federal courts. The court grants the government's applications for a partial stay of the injunctions entered below, but only to the extent that the injunctions are broader than necessary to provide complete relief to each plaintiff with standing to sue. What's she saying there, Doug?
Well, let me also take a little bit of an issue with something that was said, that Congress issued power to the courts. And the reason why they're saying that, because the only issuer of power is the Constitution. But because Congress can create, have created the inferior courts, then it is seen as that they also can issue power. So I don't like the language there. But ultimately what she's saying is that the power that the courts have, if you are a inferior court, you have a certain jurisdiction, a certain region, that's it. Your job is what is before you, who the defendants before you are, and in your region and your jurisdiction. Nothing beyond that. For it to reach beyond that to the federal actions of a president of the United States is overreach. You were not given that authority. If that authority does exist from her point of view, that would be the Supreme Court of the United States.
And she addressed even more than jurisdiction. She talked about injunctive relief. So, for example, if you are a party that feels they're aggrieved, you go to court and you say, and an executive order comes down, and you feel I need to challenge this. I'm being, I have been injured. You can go to court, and the district judge can say, okay, we'll get a stay of relief just for you, because your relief is very visible and evident. But I don't get to give relief to the entire country.
Right.
Now, what this opens the door to is class actions. When a class is certified, it can, if the whole nation is a class and a court rules that, then you can get national relief. So we're going to see a lot of gamesmanship on class action lawsuits going forward. So we got a partial victory there, but I expect more court shenanigans trying to make everything a class action suit to get the same effect as these national injunctions.
And understand the attempt to kneecap Trump's agenda, our president's agenda, if they can't get it through the courts, they're going to find another way. This is the way the left has operated, going all the way back to Alexander Hamilton. And a great example just recently was the Senate parliamentarian, who is basically a tyrant that's been embedded and nobody really knows about, but everybody respects. I actually wrote an article about that too. But we need to understand they're going to try everything they can.
Yeah, hold the thought on the parliamentarian because we may get to that today. So
okay.
We may get into a little more detail on that.
I see. Great minds think alike.
So what's interesting about this case were the dissent. The three, what would they call, liberal justices, and I use air quotes on liberal. Sotomayor wrote the dissent for the three of them, and she read this on the floor. She called the decision shameful, and that's a direct quote. And when she said they used that language, Roberts and Alito quickly turned their heads at the use of the word. They were ticked off. What Sotomayor was saying was by stripping all federal courts, including itself of equitable power, the court kneecaps judiciary authority to stop the executive.
Judicial authority to stop the executive. And I want to ask Justice Sotomayor, can you show me that in the Constitution where that exists?
It does not.
Oh.
Yeah. The bigger dissent, because she was so adamant about this, was actually from KBJ, Ketanji Brown Jackson. And
Ketanji, I'm not sure what a woman is, Jackson. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm going to read just a quick couple of summaries of this. She argued the Constitution does not permit the exercise of arbitrary power or allow any individual, including the president, to unilaterally rewrite the law. She emphasized that the majority's decision undermines the Constitution's role as a safeguard against unchecked executive authority, creating a dangerous precedent where the executive can bypass constitutional protections. Now, she is pointing out a very valid concern, because if you think about this, we just had Joe Biden, and he issued some executive orders that we weren't crazy about, and it had to be stopped in some way, shape, or form. And there has to be a process there. But we're saying it is not a district judge's national injunction.
And if you look at the exceptions clause in Article 3, what you realize is the courts are not there to check the executive or Congress. The Congress is there to check the courts. And who checks Congress or the executive, someone might ask. Well, that's where we, the people in the states, fit in.
Yeah, and if a president has a veto, that's another check as well.
Right, but then that veto could be overridden. Once again, more power is in the hands of Congress. So real quick lesson, kiddies, we don't have three co-equal branches. The legislature is supposed to be the strongest of the three. The judicial originally was intended to be the weakest of the three. Just saying.
Agreed. We're not going to be able to finish going into KBJ, so we'll get on the rest of this at the back end of the break. But it's really important, and Doug makes this point in his classes. He's the first person to teach me this, and as I've done all my research over the last 5 years, I've come to a very strong agreement. The branches, the three branches of government, were put in the Constitution in the specific order they were for a reason. The legislative was the first, and it has the most power. The executive was second, and had the second most, and it had fewer powers or authorities. And the Supreme Court came last. And we'll talk more at the other end of the break.
Sliced fish sandwiches every day, made right before your eyes. The port of Subway could be a smoking number 5 or a classic number 8, or maybe an Italian is your number 1 fave. Whatever you crave, prepare to fall in love. Sliced fish sandwiches, port of Subs.
The grilled chicken melt at Port of Subs will warm up your winter with savory grilled chicken and your favorite melty cheese on fresh-baked peppercini pepperjack bread, topped with all your favorite veggie toppings and sauces. Bundle up with savory Cool Ranch Doritos, a refreshing Sprite, and a classic chocolate chip cookie for a hearty meal that'll leave you feeling oh so satisfied. Available for a limited time at your neighborhood Port of Subs or order at portofsubs.com or on our mobile app. Port of Subs, we're slicing up the quality you crave.
Whatever yummy number you're dreaming of, sliced fresh sandwiches, Port of Subs.
Barbecue, the Butcher's Kitchen, would like to thank every customer for your loyalty and continued support through these challenging times. Call for takeout and delivery of rib tips, brisket, ahi, tuna, roasted veggies, and much more. Barbecue's open from 11 to 7, Monday through Saturday, and delivers hot food safe and healthy. Call 499-5855 for details. 499-5855 Barbecue, as featured on diners, drive-ins, and dives. Get real. Get into Barbecue Reno.
The all-volunteer nonprofit Assistance League, Reno Sparks, is working to improve lives in Washoe County. Annually, they provide new clothes and grooming essentials to over 3,000 children through Operation School Bell. Students in Transition addresses needs of homeless teens. Find out more by visiting their website, renosparks.assistanceleague.org. These activities are funded by Assistant League's Thrift Shop at 1701 Vassar Street, open 10 to 4 Monday through Saturday.
Unable to listen to the whole show? A recording of today's program will be available later today. Visit americamatters.us and click on the podcast link. Now back to the show.
All right, we are back, and when we left you, we are discussing, going through a Supreme Court scorecard from a constitutional standpoint, and we've been reviewing Trump versus CASA, which is, of course, the birthright citizenship case, but that's not what they're debating. They're debating national injunctions. When we left, we were going through Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissent, and it's gotten quite a bit of attention. It's worth spending a few more minutes on. So we continue. And she says that the majority's opinion is a threat to the rule of law. She describes the ruling as an accident, and she's using all this hyperbolic language, which it really is not the Supreme Court's norm. She describes the ruling as an existential threat to the rule of law, asserting that it allows the executive to deny rights explicitly enshrined in the Constitution, such as birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment. Doug's going to laugh because he's already explained that is hogwash.
Yeah, and I was reading, I've read so many articles about this. Enshrined in the 14th Amendment. All right, show me where it's enshrined. What does it say? Well, it says a person is born or naturalized in the United States or citizens. There's this key part that says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Modern day legal scholars will tell you that means subject to the laws, and the congressional testimony by Senator Brown, Howard and Senator Trumbull echo what it says in the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which is that and subject to jurisdiction thereof means not subject to a foreign power. Into conversation.
Yeah, and I knew Doug couldn't resist giving a little more color there because it's one of his favorite topics. We're going to.
I tried to keep it compact here though because we only have so much time.
We'll get into that in a lot more depth in the fall when this thing comes up, when the case itself comes up in front of the Supreme Court. And again, we have reviewed it on my channel. She continues, unless individuals can mount individual legal challenges, this, she argues, places an undue burden on citizens to defend their rights in a slow judicial process. Well, that's a valid point. The judicial system is absolutely designed to make it hard for individuals to get justice. So she's not entirely wrong there.
Well, and even government, the wheels grind slowly on purpose. There is quick and efficient government. It's called a dictatorship. Go ahead.
She gave a historical comparison to Korematsu. That is the Japanese World War II internship case, which is a big black eye on the Supreme Court's record. But now she's appealing to emotion. And this court case has nothing to do with that one. They're not ruling on Korematsu. They're not ruling on birthright citizenship. They're ruling on judicial injunctions. She challenges the majority's, she says, fly-by-night approach to deciding significant cases on the emergency docket, arguing that it obscures accountability and erodes public trust in the judiciary. So she's saying the district judge can snap their fingers and have a national injunction, but the Supreme Court's got to take their time and let it wind its way through, and there should be no emergency docket. Talking out of both sides of her mouth.
Of course.
She argues that she posits that courts must have the authority to compel the executive to follow the law universally. Should I repeat that? She posits that courts must have the authority to compel the executive to follow the law universally, warning that without this power, compliance becomes a matter of executive discretion. Go ahead. I know you want to.
No, it's okay. It's just the court's trying to dictate to the president, first of all. Second of all, what does the law say? It's not what they think it. Remember, all these Biden-nominated judges struggled with constitutional questions during their confirmation. Ketanji Brown Jackson a few times didn't know basic legal terms, basic constitutional items, and then was asked, what was it? It was a case that goes back to Dred Scott, and she didn't even know some of the details of Dred Scott that a historian and a judge should know.
Well, I knew that one, and I was taught Dred Scott in high school. That's how important that case is.
Yeah.
All right, so we're not going to spend any more time on this opinion she gave, but just suffice it to say, it was one of the most unorthodox and worst opinions of all time. Now, these Supreme Court justices are usually very collegial to each other. Even if they disagree vehemently, they are polite to each other.
And you have to understand, too, it's real quick, when they are legally wrong, they won't admit it because, they're emotionally right. But anyway.
Amy Coney Barrett, towards the end of her opinion, she wrote some scathing language on Ketanji Brown Jackson's opinion, and this is language you will never, ever see in a Supreme Court justice. And I'm just going to read a couple lines because you'll get the gist. She says, "We will not dwell on Justice Jackson's argument, which is at odds with more than 2 centuries worth of precedent, not to mention the Constitution itself."
Nailed it.
Yeah, she's saying everything that KBJ just said is absolute nonsense, complete nonsense, and not based on any rational theory whatsoever. That's pretty harsh language to put into an official opinion. Only this. Justice Jackson decries an imperial executive while embracing an imperial judiciary. That's one of the best written opinions I think I've ever seen. And my question, of course, is, 2 questions. We'll talk about the judiciary versus the executive, but also this kind of animosity that's likely to be boiling up from this, is that going to serve to continue to push Amy Coney Barrett to the right? And that's something very interesting to watch.
I think so. And remember, when she was being confirmed, she kind of was championed as this constitutional originalist kind of justice. Her rulings, though, have been, and I've wondered about her rulings, they have been tenuous at best. And I've wondered if absolutely this is going to push her in the right direction. And the others. Alito and Thomas, I think, have taken the lead as the top guys there, and I think the respect for them is increasing with the other justices, aside from the terrible threesome. So we'll see, but I think you're right.
Okay, let's jump into a new case. Shall we give the Supreme Court a grade there on their ruling on the national injunctions? I am inclined to give them a solid B+. And the reason that does not deserve an A, because it was their correct decision that, yes, district judges do not have the authority that they were wielding. But no, the reason it's not an A is because they still left it open for a bunch of class action suits to try to accomplish the exact same thing. And that's going to get messy. And I'd rather have seen them close the loophole.
I give them a solid A. I don't think that loophole is necessarily as glaring as you may think. And I was, be honest with you, kind of stunned. I wasn't really, I don't know why. I've been very cynical of of these decisions that have been coming down, but in my expectations. But I was pleasantly surprised. Solid A.
Very good. All right, the next case we're going to jump into is called Kennedy versus Braidwood Management. Kennedy is named because he is the head of the HHS, and Braidwood Management were the plaintiffs. Background of this case is in 1984, Department of Health and Human Services created the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force. This is a body that formulates what they called evidence-based recommendations regarding preventive healthcare services. So what's going to be at issue is what is preventative healthcare services and how much authority do they have? The big issue in this case was what's called pre-exposure prophylaxis, PrEP, which is a medication to prevent HIV. It is the focal point of the case is it's due to the plaintiff's religious objections to having to provide healthcare or preventative healthcare to something that's against what they morally and religiously object to. There's other preventative services like cancer screenings, statin medications for cardiovascular health, diabetes screening, etc. That maybe they'd be okay following the rules and providing that for their employees. But when it comes to crossing their religious objections, that's what's on the table here. So this U.S. Preventative Service Task Force is a group of 16 volunteer members appointed by the HHS Secretary. In 1999, Congress codified this group as an entity within the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. Obamacare in 2010 took them from having an advisory role to requiring most insurers to cover these preventative things without cost sharing those preventative services, basically forcing insurers or employers to cover preventive care. You with me so far?
Yeah, and they could codify it all they want, but in the end, there's certain questions I'm going to have. But go ahead.
The plaintiffs is a company called Braidwood Management. They run a health and wellness center offering insurance coverage to its approximately 70 employees through a self-insured plan.
Right.
And the issue is they did not want to have to pay for this HIV preventative treatment.
For reasons based on their faith.
Yeah, exactly. So the issue was they argued that the task force members, the 16 people that were appointed by the HHS director, had to be appointed by the President of the United States with advice and not the Secretary of Human Services.
Okay, so now we're getting the advice and consent rule that for those of you who remember the confirmation hearings, that's what that was all about. Very constitutional.
And what they're trying to do is, okay, let's say you guys have no authority whatsoever because you were not appointed by the president, and therefore we don't have to listen to your dictates, even though it's been put in the ACA, Obamacare. What the Supreme Court ruled was interesting. They ruled that these 16 volunteer members of the appointment are inferior offers, and therefore they are subject to the oversight by HHS. They ruled against the plaintiffs. And I think we're going to have to look for other litigation to address the religious objection, because the path that the Braidwood Management took, they were trying to find a legal maneuver to get away from a law, and the Supreme Court just said, no, that's not going to happen.
Here's the thing. A, correct, that board should have been appointed by president. And B, here's the question, are these medical whatever, is that even an authority of the federal government? No, it's not. However, there's federal funding. So that's where it brings it back to the federal courts, and where the First Amendment might actually be a good angle. But I have a feeling we're running out of time here, so we'll have to explain that after the break.
No, we've got a little more time here. Got about another minute. Well, yeah.
We got about 30 seconds, 20 seconds, right. Something like that.
You're a better clock watcher than I am. Yeah, it's interesting. The question is, should this rulemaking authority have this kind of power? It's a national injunction from a government agency. And that was addressed in the Chevron deference last year, what the Supreme Court got right. So, and I guess we're heading into our break.
Hi, this is Eddie Floyd. Let me tell you about my favorite non-profit public charity, Wainema Wild Horse Sanctuary, located on the Forsyth Ranch in Hallelujah Junction area. And please go to www.wynemaranch.com. That's WYNEMA ranch.com.
Well, Jason, I've got to tell you, you're pretty much everything this company is looking for in an entry-level candidate.
Great.
Your resume isn't quite what we're used to, but you've got a fantastic work ethic.
Thank you.
And I'm impressed by how you carry yourself.
So, should we talk about the job?
What? The job? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I have no way of recruiting or even meeting you. This interview didn't happen.
It may sound ridiculous, and that's because it kind of is. There's a huge pool of talent your company is missing out on. Meet the grads of life. Who are they? Talent worth knowing about. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or even mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Man, we really could have used him.
Don't miss out on a resource many innovative companies have already discovered. Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
And what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No, I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that. Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now back to the...
And we are back for our final segment of today's show. Before we jump on to the next couple of cases, Doug, let's give a grade for the Supreme Court on that case of Kennedy versus Braidwood Management.
F. And if the thing is, because of the fact that that board was created by the federal government, or should have been by Congress, and there is federal funding going into this, and they're trying to dictate when they're unconstitutionally not supposed to, the court should have not only taken the case, but the angle shouldn't have been whether or not religious freedom. It's the fact that that board shouldn't exist in the first place. There is no constitutional authority for that board, but since it does exist, they were interfering with religious freedoms, and indirectly, that's Congress making law through an agency. So they should have taken the case, and the plaintiff should have won easily.
Yeah, I gave them a C+ because I think it's a case that's worth hearing. I think the arguments that the plaintiffs made were not strong. They were looking for a legal loophole instead of addressing the actual merits of the things that are at issue, like religious liberty and the overstepping of the federal agencies. But based on the case that was brought, I think they got it mostly correct, and I gave them a C+ because of that. All right, jumping into our next case. We're going to try to get at least two more in here, and these are some fun ones. First one we're going to do is something called 7 County Infrastructure Coalition versus the Sierra Club. And what this is all about is up in Utah, there was a proposal to build an 88-mile railway through Utah to transport oil. It was going through like 7 counties. And of course, anytime you try to do anything with energy in America, some kind of conservationist group is going to sue you and try to stop it. In this case, it's the Sierra Club. This goes to court, winds its way through, and finally gets to the Supreme Court this year. And the Supreme Court rules 5-3. Neil Gorsuch did not participate. That federal agencies are only required to assess direct environmental impacts under the National Environmental Policy Act. It's called NEPA, N-E-P-A, not indirect or cumulative effects. This is going to have a lot of implications for environmental law going forward. And if you couple that with things like the Chevron deference and a couple other cases from last year, it's become a much more business-friendly Supreme Court. This decision narrows the scope of environmental reviews, facilitating projects like a proposed railway through Utah, and it limits the EPA's regulatory powers over water pollution. In 2024, the courts had limited the EPA's what's called the Good Neighbor Rule, and that refers back to the Chevron deference. So what really is at issue is, can this Environmental Protection Agency and other agencies expand the scope of their studies to halt and bogged down for years in studies any kind of development whatsoever that does not fit the agency or the political whims of the moment.
Well, you know what? We've got a few things going on here. Is in the environment something that is authorized by the Constitution? No. But are disputes that cross state lines a federal authority? Yes. Federal courts, federal and Congress would need to get involved in those disputes. So the question is not whether or not they can dictate the environmental end of it, but first of all, should this have even gone to the federal courts in the first place? Is it a dispute between the states, or is it just a dispute between somebody who doesn't like the fact that this is happening? So they should have taken the case. I think that I think they were on the right track essentially, but I would have, if I were a Supreme Court justice, would have pointed out that when it comes to the larger scheme of things, the very fact that the EPA exists in the first place is unconstitutional.
Yeah, it's you can create government agencies, but it's got to be done through an act of Congress. In some cases, but otherwise, sometimes it requires a constitutional amendment, and a lot of these government agencies overstep the Congress's constitutional authorities.
That goes back to the Chevron deference. Can the regulatory agencies or departments interpret the law and then basically create law by how they enforce it or interpret it, or it must be only Congress? And then when it came to Congress's law, must it be specifically in the Constitution as a power, or can it be implied, express versus implied, which is something I'm sure we'll talk about on future shows.
Yeah, and this case is it's obviously it's going to be a touchy one because it has to do with quote unquote environmentalism. Like, we all want to protect the environment, but we also want to have economic growth, and there's a balance that has to be reached. And when you have government agencies basically making it impossible for any sort of growth without paying all kinds of excessive lawyer fees, et cetera, it's counterproductive to the end goal. You can have growth and be environmentally conscious.
No, and as a golfer, camper, hunter, of course I want to protect the environment. If there's gunk in the air, clean it up. If there's gunk in the water, clean it up. I think all of us believe that we should be good stewards of the planet. That's not the question here, although environmentalist groups will tend to make that the question. The question here is simply, does the federal government have the authority? Where does the authority lie? And how extensive should those protections or regulations be?
Yeah, in this case, the courts correctly limited the federal agency's authorities, which is a good thing. Now, when giving a grade, one of the things I always like to tell how good is a Supreme Court decision. You can always judge by the reactions from certain people how good of a decision it was. And in this case, I've got on screen a Reuters article about this where it just says Supreme Court dealt blows to EPA and environmental protections. And that's the headline without even getting into what was actually argued. So, they'll give you the scary headline to get the emotional response, and then they will go into the story and maybe report it somewhat accurately.
And you hear this often. Politics is the science of what's possible. And so from a what's possible point of view, what a really good ruling. But what might be beyond possible, the true originalist constitutional, I think they missed the mark a little bit. But then again, maybe it wasn't possible yet.
Okay, this next one is going to be a fun one.
Did you want to grade that one real quick?
Oh, yeah, let's give it a grade.
Yeah, I give it a B. Because they were right, but from a purely originalist constitutionalist point of view, I believe they could have gone a little bit further in limiting, if not eliminating, many of the EPA's unconstitutional activities.
Very good. Let's do the next one. Let's go.
No grade from you?
I'm going to agree with you on a B. It was a very, very solid ruling. It may not have been stated the way probably we would have liked to have, but the result is going to be pretty. The end result's going to be pretty good.
And it gets back to the game of the possible. And I think that's what it was possible for them to do, considering.
Let's jump into Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton, because this is a fun one.
Paxton being the AG from Texas?
Yes, Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton.
Gotta like the guy. I'm sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm on board with you there. He's been fantastic. So what was this case about? Well, the Free Speech Coalition, those guys probably are up, they're probably good people, right? So basically, this
and
is
just like the Federalist Party was. Yeah, go ahead.
Basically, this is the pornographic industry backed by the ACLU. That's the American Civil Liberties Union. So supposed to be free speech.
So their free speech is free love. All right, go ahead.
They are suing Texas over a 2023 law that required age verification for online pornography access. Okay, that's the law passed duly in Texas by the legislature. Said you got to be 18. By the way, there's 20 other states passing similar laws.
And you have a dynamic here. It's very interesting because the internet is everywhere across state lines, but a state is trying to say, in our state, though, this is the rule. So we've got a battle here. Go ahead.
Yeah, and there's some tough enforceability because you got things like VPNs. How do you know what state someone's in? But the fact is, you've got to show identification to buy cigarettes, buy alcohol, get into a strip club, you name it, and they're arguing that.
Back when I was a kid, to buy a Playboy magazine, which ties into this. So,
all right, so this law is criticized by the adult entertainment industry, who believe it's a violation of freedom of speech. The federal judge had previously blocked the law a day before it was set to take effect, saying it deters adults access to legal sexually explicit material for having to produce ID, even though you have to do it for other things. The appeals court freezes that decision. The law, they said, and this is a quote, the law rationally related to the government's legitimate interest in preventing minors' access to porn. Sounds reasonable. April 2024, representatives of the adult entertainment industry, represented by the ACLU, argued for First Amendment right to access explicit content online and should be allowed to exercise that right as they see fit without having to worry about exposing their personal identifying info in the process. Where in the First Amendment do they talk about the right to see pornography?
Well, they're going to put it under freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, maybe. I don't know. But ultimately, the question isn't where is it in the First Amendment. The question is, regarding this, is it Congress making law? Congress shall make no law. Is that not how the First Amendment begins? So is the U.S. Congress a part of this? No, not at all. This is a state deciding what goes on in a state. Well, yeah, but Doug, we shouldn't have to show IDs for things. So wait a second. Age verification was even important to the Founding Fathers. They set an age for voting at 21. Now, granted, they were probably not having everybody pull out a driver's license since they didn't exist yet, but this was something that maybe in certain places age verification was important. You don't have an age in order to do something without the possibility of age verification needed. The problem here is that the guy who wants to hide his activities now can't. Well, that's what it's coming down to. And that's what they're fighting against. Because how could you, from a basic, just common sense point of view, say, oh, we don't want age verification. We want kids to see this. No, we don't.
Well, Justice Clarence Thomas, who wrote the opinion, agrees with you. He said that states hold the power to prevent minors from seeing speech. He says that power includes the power to require proof of age before an individual can access such speech. It follows that no person, adult or child, has a First Amendment right to access such speech without first submitting proof of age. Thomas is one of our favorites. He says a little bit more, but we're running low on time. So let's get a quick...
Thomas and Alito, you got to love those guys.
So let's give a quick grade on this one. I think they nailed it. That's actually a solid A. It's absolutely a states' rights and issue and not a First Amendment. So this one gets an A.
A+ from me, and it's exactly right. States' rights, state decision. This is up to each state when it comes to things like this. And this is, I think the founders would be smiling if they could see what happened here.
All right. Well, that was great for our first episode. We are running out of time. We will continue more of SCOTUS Scorecard next week at the exact same time, Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Doug, thanks for coming.
Don't forget to visit me, DouglasVGibbs.com.
Cheers. And if you guys like everything, leave a comment on my Rumble. Let us know what you'd like to see us do better. But cheers, everyone. Thanks for watching.
For one nation